way back in 1975, Eastman Kodak Company created the engineer, the research and development laboratory. Discovered they had an engineer then that is called Steve Sasson. Apparently what had happened was Steve Sasson took time in the on his research, and he came out with the first digital camera. Now this was way back in 1975, and when he came back, this was in the glory days of Kodak. Kodak was the number one, as far back as then. They had about 80% of the photography market in America, in the United States of America. Kodak film was number one. They had 80% of the market. So by the time their engineer was coming up, Steve Sasson, by the time he was coming up with the first digital camera in 1975, what it generated was a black and white film, and they looked at it. He presented it and told them that this is the future of photography. A production where you don't need a film, you don't need a chemical, you don't need to go into the laboratory, you don't need to work on any chemical processing, you don't need any paper. Just digital camera, taking the snap and producing the film. And by the time the management saw what he came up with, it was at the early stage, so it was just black and white compared to the colored that we all identify with when it comes to Kodak. And when he brought it out to the management, they looked at it and just shoved it aside and walked away from the idea. Didn't believe in it. They doubted it. He presented it and told them that this was the future of photography, but nobody believed him. Now fast forward 25 years, by year 2000, other big players were coming into the scene. They were not coming with the film production that was used for photography, that as with the traditional knowledge of photography. They weren't going in that direction. They went with digital camera. Now we're talking about Canon, we're talking about other big players that came in. Then along the line we start seeing the smartphone through Samsung, Apple. They start coming in, and before we could say what was going on, by the year 2012 Kodak was filing for chapter 12 bankruptcy. They were completely wiped off the market. This was $1 billion company way back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, but because they refused to move into the future through digital camera, that their engineer was the first to discover. They shot the idea aside, and eventually the company became bankrupt. Now most times it is not the fact that they lack the idea, it's not that they lack the innovation, it's just that they refuse to accept the fact that change has come. Most time people tend to go with traditional way of thinking. They refuse to walk away from an idea because it has made so much profit. But when that idea starts fading out, start going out of its glory days, when the new thing is about to be ushered in, most directors, most owners of companies get stuck with what was working, forgetting that everything that is working now will only work for a particular period of time.